I would assume that Alberta and potentially Saskatchewan are U.S. territories sometime in the next, I would say 10 years, potentially sooner at the rate things are moving.
ESW Rogue News. Create your own free world.
Good morning, everybody. It is Cowboy here. As we're recording this, it is 11 a.m. EST. I've got Ben Kelleran here, Kelleran's Corner. We got a lot of really fun stuff to cover today. Before we do, take a look at the description. There's a link in there. Got a couple of goodies for you. We have a free algo. I put it together. It's a video that you get to see me create the algo, see me turn it into code with Grok. And then I show you the tools that traders use once they've optimized the algo. I show you the tools they use to connect it to their broker so they can have the computer trade it while they're not even sitting at the computer. It's cool stuff. Just as importantly, if not more, we got Ben's information in there. We got, I believe it's your Substack we have in there. But if you are maybe one of the many people who are just kind of listening to this, not able to look at the description, Ben, can you please let people know how to find you before we get started?
Yeah, if you want to find the podcast or YouTube channel, you can just look up Contrarian Corner with 2 Ks, and you'll be able to find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Substack should take you there as well if you just fire up a Google search. But yeah, it should be pretty easy to find me. And then it's on Ben Kelleran, or something like that on Twitter. You should be able to find me. It's not rocket science there.
Aren't you BR Kelleran on Twitter?
I think that's the handle, but if you look up Ben Kelleran, it'll pop up as well. So,
or Contrarian Corner, actually.
Yeah, it should.
So yeah, Ben, always like your work, and you know so much about a lot of things. I know we kind of brought you on originally to talk about markets, but you're always able to weigh in really well on the geopolitics. And I know there's a lot going on right now. You have WEF and Greenland and silver and everything. So where do you want to get started? Like, where do you want to take it today?
Yeah, so I figured high level, it'd be interesting to talk about some of the recent events regarding Greenland, regarding the World Economic Forum, and some of the things where Trump's threatening tariffs. Markets are freaking out about a bunch of different things. The metals keep rolling, but I think the current event side is what kind of has my attention right now.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, so as far as the World Economic Forum this week, I think it's going to be interesting to see what Trump says tomorrow, I guess, as we're recording this. He supposedly has a speech. I'm not sure exactly what time it is, but that I think is going to be something to watch, because that's like one of those events where, right, you can listen to what they say, but it's also important to watch what they do. And I'm sure there are a bunch of backroom conversations happening as far as some of these different negotiations, people talking about Greenland, people talking about how these things are going to get dealt with. And this kind of goes back to the oversimplified version of the game of Risk, right? Where the board game that everyone played at least a couple times as a kid, right? You get the 5 army bonus if you control North America, right? So that's, I think when you look at what's going on, and especially what's going on in the Arctic, right? You're going to see, I think, more focus being put on Greenland and Canada, especially with some of the stuff going on as far as the their conversations with China and some of the different things where, I don't know if you saw this, but Carney like specifically said something about New World Order. And,
oh, geez.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting to see stuff like that come out of, I mean, he's just a mouthpiece for someone, but he's definitely like on team globalist shitbag, basically.
Oh, he was the Carney, who now I believe is the Prime Minister of Canada, used to be the head of the Bank of England. He's, that guy's a swamp rat if there ever was one. I mean, to see the mask fall off so efficiently is great.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see, like, while you have all this stuff going on, you've also got the Alberta secession vote that, from what I've seen, and this is like filter it through the social media, so you can't be 100% certain, but it seems like there's a lot of people lining up to go and vote in favor or sign the petition, whatever the process is. So, like, I'm not getting too far ahead of myself, like assuming it's going to happen quickly, but I think it is something where that is going to continue to be a theme. And I would assume that Alberta and potentially Saskatchewan are U.S. territories sometime in the next, I would say 10 years, potentially sooner at the rate things are moving, whether it's you look at Venezuela, you look at Greenland. But it's definitely a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff to pay attention to. And it's not just to keep an eye on, like, it's easy enough to keep an eye on markets, I think, with some of the stuff going on. But if you kind of add this into the mix, there's a lot of shit flying at the same time, kind of everything everywhere all at once.
Interesting. That's quite a statement if you think about it, to think that Saskatchewan and Alberta will be U.S. territories in that time, because, you know, this is a massive divergence from the whole, you could say, world order that has been going on since really since World War II, if not before. You had NATO, right? And you have Europe, who is basically NATO combined with the US, Europe and US or NATO. And then, of course, coming after Greenland is putting NATO at jeopardy. But there are theories that Canada is part of the whole ant jar that you hear kind of on the, you know, the whole ant jar concept, where Rome used to
red ants and black ants,
and black ants, and they would deliberately move populations near each other that would fight in the future, and you can set them against each other to make them weaker. I think that's Ian Burlingame talks a lot about that. You know, Tom Luongo, it's that whole nexus is and I agree with it, by the way. I think it's a really good theory. And so, you know, Canada, and I forgot who said it last week. I didn't say this, but Canada is that ant jar that was been put to the north of us by England, I think, and just there to kind of keep, you know, they wanted the whole continent. They couldn't get it all. They made sure they kept Canada. And if you listen to Matt Arrett, you know, he talks a lot about how so much of the problems we've had going back, you know, 250 years, a lot of the wars, a lot of the conflicts, a lot of that has come out of operations that were done in Canada. So, you know, the last 80, 100 years, sure, like, oh, Canada's nice and they're our friend. Like, really? Okay. I think that's a lot of propaganda, and I think a lot of people don't know history. I'll leave it there.
Well, I think when you have just as long of a border as we have with Canada, and then you see some of the stuff about fentanyl and like the immigration stuff, like it's right. It's not just stuff flowing across the southern border that's an issue, and that's just one piece of it. But when you start to dig into some of the connections that Canada has, like the different agendas they're pursuing, all these different things. EM was saying on my podcast last week with him that Europe is basically going to use Canada as a pawn against the US and try and create strife that way, like you were saying with the ant jar kind of image. But the thing that I find interesting about that is you have one of the things that Canada has in spades is resources. And right, that's, I think, a big part of why Alberta's getting fed up is they're basically being used as tax cattle to fund whatever bullshit is going on in the capital. And right, if you look at the tax transfer payments, like it's actually insane how much Alberta sends to like the federal government. But that's, I think, one of the main things. But they're also, I think there's a lot of things where, like, culturally, there's more. Alberta has more in common with certain parts of the U.S. than they do with the French elite, or was it the Laurentian elite? Is kind of the phrase for the people running things on the federal side. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. But I think it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, because if you do see Alberta go, then that basically is, I would say, a death blow for what Canada is now. And it's right, maybe not instant, but it's something where, okay, the other territories and the other areas of the country that aren't like, I think you could see things splinter into, you got Quebec trying to be its own thing, and then Alberta effectively takes Saskatchewan, and then since BC is isolated, that will eventually peel off as well. And then you start to connect Alaska with Yukon and some of these different provinces. And I think it's one of those things where once the first domino goes, it could be a lot quicker than people expect for something like that. And again, this is not like a 2026 prediction. This is more of a 5 to 10 year view that I think we are going to see basically the U.S. have a significant level of control over what's going on in Canada. And I don't think that means there'll be states in the future, but well, they might be states down the road. I think that would be territories first, but it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. So,
yeah, there's a lot of talk about Putin meeting Trump in Alaska, underground tunnels. The concern I have is, well, I'll talk about that a little bit. Obviously, if we're going to do business with Russia through underground tunnels through the Bering Strait, then those goods have to make it to the U.S. And if Canada is an adversary, then that's a lot of territory through which those goods must travel. But that would mean that we either have to take BC or we would have to build some railroads through Alberta, Saskatchewan, and wherever else the railroads go through, which we don't own. Rail itself, whether it's in your territory or not, it's a target that could be hit very easily. Not everybody's watching thousands of miles of rail. So whether we own the territory or not, it's, in my opinion, that's not a deal breaker for the rail. The deal is just that there needs to be a deal made. So whether we take the territory, which, I don't know, you're talking about some pretty bold moves, and Canada being a country with a massive border to the US. I'm wondering what needs to be done there. And I'm concerned with what Trump has and hasn't done. We were all promised a lot of things that we're not seeing from Trump right now. No mass deportations, Epstein files were a flop. And I know everybody's going to say, oh, we need time to get things, and that, everything has to happen in a certain order. It's like, well, that may be good. What is it? Well and good. People are not happy with Trump's performance, and people are not happy with this performance going into the midterms. We don't really have a lot of time to see actual results from the Trump administration in order to keep the voters satisfied. So I'm not so confident that we're going to get a continuation of these policies once he is out. And I'm not so confident we're going to have a Congress that will allow these policies to move forward after October. So whatever's going to be done, better be done quick. And I don't think it's going to happen. I'm concerned that everything we've seen in the last year is just going to be started. It's going to grind to a halt after October, and it's going to be reversed after 2028.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I'll piggyback on that and also say, with all the stuff that's been going on with Trump, I think they have had several chances to take events or certain things that have popped up and have been at basically top of mind for everyone in the US, whether it's things like Charlie Kirk or things like the Somalian immigrant stuff, where it's okay, it's pretty obvious, where you have, I'll pull up the screen I had ready to go on, let's see, one of these, if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. So this is the list of different countries. You don't need to see the exact numbers, but Trump tweeted this out, which great, better than doing nothing. But at the same time, they'll tweet something out, nothing will be done about it, where you've got 72% of Somalian households being on basically handouts, right? And so it's not the American dream. They're just here for a better life, here for a chance to work hard. They're here for the American handout. The way they kind of look at it is this is a land of milk and honey, and if they can basically take tax dollars from people that are working their ass off for it, then they don't have any shame doing that. Right? They don't view it as. I think
they're laughing at us. I think they're giving us money.
Yeah.
There are groups that do that even more in massive numbers, who are far better established in certain areas of New York and New Jersey. And they wear little tiny hats. I mean, this isn't just confined to the Somalis, and the Somalis
I'm
are actually.
I'm sure you've seen that video where it's the specific. It's they don't let anyone else live there. The grocery store clerk is what percent of people pay with EBT? It's 100%. It's
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, these are people who supposedly have a history of being financially very sound, and yet they're all on all of the benefits. And by the way, I'm not completely against like welfare. People go on hard times. Maybe there's a lot of reasons. Even business owners, have hard times, right? But that's something that you need to work to get off. When you have an entire community where you're excluded and you exclude everybody from living there, and then everybody who lives there is known to be like in a culture that tends to do financially well, and yet they're all on EBT and they all wear like little tiny hats and curly sideburns. It's like, well, I mean, are the Somalis even really what we should be paying attention to? I mean, I'm just making a comment here, like, gotta think about that.
Yeah. Well, I guess one more thing that I'll add to the Canadian discussion before I forget is if you want a rabbit hole to go down, you can check out the map. It's called the Technate of America. And apparently this was done by Elon Musk's grandfather in the 1940s. And it basically shows what effectively if you could consolidate the entire North America block, plus Venezuela, plus Panama Canal, plus Mexico.
I think Guyana is in there too.
Yeah. So it's a pretty interesting map if you want to go look up that rabbit hole. I found it pretty interesting. But the other thing, to your point on like what is being done about some of these different topics, that's one of the things where I think people get frustrated on, okay, are we going to make arrests? Are there going to be mass deportations? Is there going to be changes that are fundamentally designed to make things better in the country? Or is it going to be Pam Bondi on Fox News, like for the 100th time in like a couple months, right? And if, right, their whole approach to what is a priority in the administration is, okay, if you are friends with a country in the Middle East, or you say something that Miriam Adelson doesn't like, so they pass anti-Semitic laws, like basically hate speech laws or whatever they want to call them. Right. If that's the approach, then people are just going to say, look, like, yeah, there are certain things that have been better, right? The border's closed, right? So you're not getting unlimited immigration. But at the end of the day, if they're not going to do enough and Trump is not going to be the guy to cross the Rubicon and make some of these changes, then there is going to come a point where people just say, look, I just want someone to fix it. I don't care what a judge says. I don't care if, like, to have judges that are born outside the country, like ruling that what Trump can or can't do on some of these things is just asinine, right? It's just silly. We're not like taking this seriously. And there are, I think, punishments that should be handed out for stuff that is obviously like treason, but we're not there yet. And I don't know how long it's going to take for kind of the political Overton window to catch up, but it's definitely been moving quickly over the last like handful of years. So on that part, I'm optimistic.
I mean, it has, but the censorship is getting kind of put right back in. So we had all the censorship, the woke stuff. You couldn't say anything about any particular groups. There's only one group that you really can't talk about without Trump. You can talk about Somalis, you can talk about British people, Italians all day long. You talk about the Irish, Colombians, like, but you can't talk about the little hats, right? You can right now. You kind of can a little bit. So let me just put it to you this way. Like, I was talking to my wife the other day. And we have two families who are very good friends of ours, and they're from that group, and they're wonderful people. So I'd say that the biggest problem is like the Zionists, as opposed to, everybody goes, it's the Jews. Like, okay, every group has its shitheads. But what concerns me is that the censorship comes down on you if you talk about one particular group. I don't know if you follow this kind of thing, but I was in another chat this morning with V where Sneeko, if you know who he is, he's like he's a conservative, kind of like a
social media influencer type.
He's a social media influencer. He's conservative. He's a Muslim. He's friends with like Nick Fuentes though, and they did. So long story short, he had like some show over the weekend with Nick Fuentes and with this guy named Claviculars, just a new version of those guys, kind of, and then Andrew Tate. And right after that, some like promoter talks to Sneeko and says, I can't let you in the clubs anymore. You're anti-Semitic. And all the clubs that like Sneeko goes to and does a lot of business at, they just won't let him in now because he's anti-Semitic. Like, Sneako's like, no, dude, I talk about all the different issues when they're relevant, So long story short, it seems like the censorship is coming back a bit, like where the pendulum is kind of moving back towards censorship. And it's like one group that you can't talk about. And so I will just end this rant by saying that if you cannot talk about a group, they are the problem. Because I can talk about the Russians, I can talk about the Chinese, I could talk about our own government, I can talk about Trump, I can talk about Biden. You couldn't talk about Biden for a little while, but I can talk about Biden. But it's whatever you cannot talk about, they are the problem. And the more the censorship comes down, the more of a problem it is. And the more that happens in the US, either we're going to just bend over and take it, or we're not going to bend over and take it. And the not bending over and take it is the fix it politics that you're talking about. And that tends to not end very well for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's not the cleanest route, but I think that's kind of where if right, if there's no way to fix it through the system, which I'm kind of pessimistic on as the system's currently constructed, then it eventually is going to go to a place where, okay, like, look, we don't care like what the votes are, what the tallies say. Like, this is our country. This is like where my grandparents and great grandparents and on, right, grew up. And I don't think these groups belong here. I don't think these people should be in power. And people will basically say, like, oh, what about democracy and what about this other stuff? And it's like, look, if democracy is a bunch of boomers and like ancient people voting about like who gets the most welfare money or where we're going to send our military dollars to, right? Right, then democracy is not a system worth like upholding, right? And it's not worth fighting for. So I think that's one of the things that you're going to see that'll be interesting to keep an eye on is like, can you get buy-in for whatever the next adventure in the Middle East is? Can you get buy-in for some of these different agendas? Can you get like voter turnout even just for the midterms, right? And this is where I'm sure you saw some of the stuff out of Virginia recently with their agenda and new laws, where I'll share my screen here so people can kind of read along. But this is like what people do when they're playing to win instead of basically being, I guess, the beautiful losers, as some people like to call them, right? So
You mean cucks?
yeah, that's the less polite way to say it. But right, so since the Republicans decided it was a good idea to run a Jamaican woman instead of a white man, right? That's a race they probably could have won, especially with some of the shit that was going on in Virginia. But now, like, they're putting out legislation to make it illegal to hand count votes, right? So that's like plus voter fraud, right? You can't do allows abortion up to the day of birth, right? Eliminating penalties for different crimes, including like theft, robbery. I think like child porn and shit like that is in there. But it's just ridiculous. Some of the different restrictions that are going in. I think they're also like trying to gerrymander to get more Democrat representatives at the federal level. So like, that's what it looks like when you take power and you use it to punish your enemies and reward your friends, right? And that's what the Republicans can't seem to do, or like they just want to play by the rules or the spirit of the rules. But at the end of the day, like if they're just up there to lose and be the Washington Generals, basically, where they're not going to do anything, then right, if the conservatives don't conserve things, then what's the point of voting for them? That's kind of, I think, where people will that mentality will go over time.
Well, yeah, what they're doing is voting for conservatives at this point is just slowing the process of death. So if you die really slowly, then you kind of get used to when your organs start to fail and they give you new medication and you don't feel the pain and your body starts to fail very slowly. But, when a few organs fail all at once, you're like, oh, gosh, I better do something about this, right? You start to eat better. And so I think that this is a managed decline. economically, and I don't think there's anything that's ever going to stop the managed decline economically. I think we're going to move on to a new system, and it's not going to feel good. But there's nothing to stop that train. Excuse me. But I do think that they also want to manage the population's ability to deal with the corruption. And I don't know, I've been saying this like for 2 or 3 months, and now I'm starting to hear it in some of the bigger names saying it. Like it's turning people into accelerationists is what it's doing. It's basically turning people into, you know what, let's go ahead and not only not vote for people who are just not doing a great job. Let's actually vote for the other side. Let's just put Democrats in so they just ruin it really fast. And then that way the people like revolt. Like that's because it doesn't seem like voting for our leaders that we want is really making a difference. Like, show me sure, we tighten the border down. That's great. Like that's a positive thing, but that's not fixing the problem. It's just putting a Band-Aid on an axe wound. So now I am of a mind that there are a lot of people who came here that, first of all, I'm like the RFK mind frame of immigration. We should let more people in and vet them because, in the end, it's not a bad idea. But in the meantime,
where are they coming from though?
Where are they coming from? What's their background? Do they have diseases? Are they criminals? Are they, what's their, can they pass a simple math test? There's a lot of things that you could put, we want people who will contribute, not be a drain.
Well, there's a reason that up until hard seller that we basically had like a European, tilt to a quota system.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, you let the Italians in for a while, you let the Irish in for a while, and then you stop. Right. So, I don't know. It's hard to talk about immigration because in reality, we're in a weird situation economically, and I think there needs to be I think everything just needs to fall apart. I don't think there's any saving what we've done without a severe depreciation of our entire economy. Because I don't know.
Here's the thing that I think is interesting is like, if you want to fix like the affordability, if you want to fix some of these issues, right, it does, right? The economy side of things and all that does come back to immigration, because if you were really focused on, hey, like we should have people that are able to afford homes when they're 30, 35, and it's not 10 times income in a place that people actually want to live, right? So if you look at the laws that are on the books, you can actually go after employers for hiring illegals. You can go after landlords. You can go after financial institutions. Like, you can go down the list. And so if the will was there, right, and they actually were following up, you could create policies where people would basically have to self-deport, right? And it's like, yeah, we're not doing any more medical service if you're not here legally. And we're not going to do any more birthright citizenship because that's just a scam, right? And we're not going to do all these different things that have been basically put in place to effectively sabotage the country, whether it's, right, going back and looking at the Civil Rights Act, going back and looking at hard seller and putting like a full-blown moratorium on immigration for 5 years, 10 years, maybe longer, right? And EM was kind of saying like he thinks it's a 20 to 30-year process for all this stuff. And I think if they actually wanted to fix the problems, I think it could be done a lot quicker, right?
I think the problem is that, and this is Avella's sort of comment, both sides of the aisle and the elites that control them, they need the illegal immigration because it's the slave labor for their factories here in the U.S. So they can bring people in who will work for a pittance and have no legal rights. So their entire business model will fall apart at that point. And then the rebuilding of that business, it's going to involve the elites not making as much money here in the US. And a lot of businesses just won't be able to compete or function with their overseas counterparts.
Yeah, but do you want to have a functioning country, or do you want to try and
just
loot
talking
the
about
treasury? Right?
I'm not talking about the answer. I'm just talking about the problem.
Yeah.
And the main part of that problem, AV,
Hey, gentlemen.
the main part of that problem is it has to do with, I mean, what you're going to look at that point is, well, V, you might want to weigh in on this a little bit, because
Sure.
we're all kind of in agreement here. Like, you don't want to just let people come in and be slave labor with no rights. And then, yeah, sure, you get cheap goods and your oligarchs get to have businesses with basically what is slave labor. And that's why the immigration has been able to go on as long as it has. With that has come other issues, obviously, through immigration and open borders and such. So I'm like, completely stopping the immigration would just have a bunch of businesses fall apart. A lot of elites lose money. And it's, as much as maybe we need that to happen, I just don't think it's going to be allowed to happen, because the elites pay the politicians, and the politicians make the rules. So is whether or not it's the right thing, I just don't think it's going to happen. So where are you with all that? Like, do you think it would be a good idea if the people just got really upset and forced the politicians to make that happen and just allowed those companies to fall? Or like, what's your view on all of that?
I mean, there's an old saying that the cure can't be worse than the actual disease itself, right? And oftentimes when you're dealing with a cancer tumor that has gotten so, it starts to, spread, right? And it's getting so large that, starts developing its own blood supplies and begins to grow. One of the things that a doctor must do is being able to remove the tumor without killing the patient. This is the precarious situation that we're in, and I don't think there's any easy answer to any of this stuff. In the long term, yeah. I mean, if we're willing to put up with a few decades of economic stagnation and a collapsed currency in an Argentinian-like situation, then yeah, if we as a population could come to an agreement that we need hard medicine, that we're going to go through some very, very troubling economic hardships, that you can have complete, total economic collapse, and then also, go through it. Like, we could say, oh, we've been through it. Like, look at the Argentinians, they've been through it. Look at the Russians, they've been through it. Look at, so many of the countries that have been through it. Yeah, those countries are pretty much homogenous, right? We're not a very homogenous country, even amongst people of same racial and or genealogical background. There are so many, people of varying background, varying races, varying creeds, varying religions, varying orientations, but mostly varying political philosophies. How do you get anything done, right? So that's the thing. It's like whatever comes out on the other side of this whole entire thing, it's like it's a tricky situation, man. I don't have an easy answer for it. I really
that's
don't.
why I keep getting stumped on it, because like, what do you do?
Yeah, I struggle with it as well. I mean, I go back and forth with it as much as possible. It's a very difficult circumstance, so to speak.
I think that's where the fix-it politics comes in, right? And the kind of looking at the situation where if we don't have a system that can make some of these decisions and function like it was designed to function, then eventually people are just going to say, look, I don't care what a judge says. I don't care what like is legal or like what the like thousands of pages of legal code say. Like, we want someone who's going to do it, like do what's right and do what's in the best interest of the people. And that's where I think you head towards something that's more authoritarian. But I think that's not like when people look at like the past and assume that, oh, you're just going to get a tyrant or a king and it's just going to be a madman in charge. Like, that guy doesn't last long, no matter like what situation he's in. And he's going to need allies. He's going to need people that are basically loyal to him and loyal to the country, right? And that's where you kind of go down the rabbit hole and look at what the kind of best forms of government are and what the kind of natural forms of government, and having like a hierarchy in place. And that's where I think you get something that looks a lot closer to a monarchy. And is there a constitution, and is there going to be property rights and Second Amendment and all these different things. Like, yeah, I think that can be done. But at the end of the day, I think there's got to be a guy that has like the ultimate say and is not going to be like held back by some female judge born in Egypt or born in South America or Jamaica or wherever, like some of these judges that have been appointed, right? So that's kind of one of those things where, how do we get there? It doesn't happen without a little bit of mess, but I don't think you have, we don't have a status quo that's going to be stable indefinitely, right? Something's got to give.
Yeah. Well, this is like, I look at, and V and I were talking with some other people this morning about it, like the Cultural Revolution in China. They kind of just went crazy over there. And forgive me for, insulting anybody here, but it was pretty brutal there when the Cultural Revolution happened. I know people who were there, whose parents were there, and they had everything taken from them. And we've all read the stories. Now, at the end of it, they somehow have done what they've done, pulled a lot of people out of poverty. And, you can argue that it has to do with, you can argue a lot of things. You could say it's propaganda or whatever it is. I don't think it's propaganda. I think they're doing pretty good over there. That may or may not last. But what seems to be kind of a common thing is that before you have like a large move in a good direction, there tends to be a revolution of some sort. We had the US, 1776 revolution. And then later in the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution began, and that was unique to the world, right? So there wasn't an industrial revolution. And it just so happened that the US, probably by virtue of having oceans around it, we were able to be protected during all the wars, and our industry grew, and we ended up growing with it. And there's, that's a whole nother conversation. But before all of that happened, there was a revolution. And it was a homogenous culture up until like 40 years ago, maybe 40 years ago, we were still extremely homogenous here in the US compared to now. So even if we had a revolution, which tends to kind of reset the board, whether it's brutal or not, whether there's a dictator or strongman, whatever name you want to use, I mean, it's becoming increasingly tribal out there. Like there's a lot of, it seems like we're being pushed into a race war. There's all kinds of very and I mean violent, there's a lot of talk of violence. There's talks of race war. There's talks of all this stuff going on. They're pushing us into a tribalism. So if we all of a sudden have some kind of governmental cataclysm where a strongman has to take over, I think it's going to end up where, there's going to be some tribalism and some fighting, and it's just going to be really ugly. And are we going to even come out of it as a single country afterwards? Like, it isn't like we're all the same people. We can all like work together towards the same ends. It's you have all kinds of crazy people here who want to, neuter their children.
Yeah.
Our society is not well. Like going through some kind of a reset may not end well is my entire point.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is like, I don't know if we have a choice, right, with the trajectory we're on. And when you kind of go back to what we were kind of saying on the economy side of things, right, eventually you're going to have to do something about the parasite that is private equity, that is hyper financialization, that is all these different things. And I think like part of it, you're seeing some of these changes play out right now. And this is where I can fire up the screen share real quick, because there's a couple things that like bonds are not my area of expertise. I don't trade them much, but when you see something like this and smarter people than me are talking about like what's going on with the Japanese yen and some of the bonds over there, they're like something is going on that is bigger than just, okay, like money's rotating, things are changing. Like these are like major shifts, and what has happened over the last several months are major shifts in what I think is coming, right? I think it's going to be effectively a secular bear market for bonds. Could the long-term rates go down? Maybe. Like, could they yield curve control? Maybe. But what we're seeing in silver, what we're seeing in gold, what we're seeing in platinum, some of these other metals, right? effectively is price discovery, right? And that's where like it's really hard to look at this and say it's a great time to buy. But as long as you're still looking at silver in China, which is physical, trading at, let's see what's at today, 102 an ounce, right? When you see 7, 8, 10% gap between the physical market and what effectively has become a paper market, guess which one's going to set the price, right? And that's where if you start seeing this trade closer to parity, then it might be time for a pullback. But right, it's the same deal with platinum, palladium, all this other stuff, where I don't think they have a good look at the Chinese market, but right, that futures contract for platinum and palladium basically launched on Black Friday, and you can see what's happened in the last, call it 2 months, right? And palladium, same deal, Black Friday. It's like, okay, something's going on. Like the gap for those is even bigger, and the markets are less liquid just because of the size of them. And that's where I think the setup is a good place to be. Is like, you're going to want to hide out in physical metals, in companies that produce them, in companies that produce stuff that can't be printed. And I think nickel, I think copper, I think all these other things are going to be a good place to be invested as well. And I think that's the kind of tough part is like, okay, we can rant and rave about all the stuff going on at the society at that scale. But as far as like trying to protect and navigate like your own wealth and other people that you care about through this, right? It's the simplest and lowest risk way to do it is precious metals in your possession. And I think there's going to be an absolutely massive rotation. I'm not going to beat the dead horse again on like the silver miners and the disconnect there. But, right, if you're going to see silver going to 100, 105, 110, right? Those miners are very different companies at that silver price than they are at 30 an ounce, right? And some of these companies are still basically priced like silver is still at 45 or 50 an ounce. So that's kind of the individual level, but on the societal scale, like we need to figure out a way to deal with like the parasites, and that's that could get messy as far as the current financialized setup. But I think we are starting to see signs that we are getting price discovery, and that I think is at least a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, that's the real question is whether the U.S. stays together or not, whether it all becomes bedlam or whether it's a nice, easy transition, or we get some kind of a miracle like technology or whatever to save the day. The question remains.
You know, the worst thing is, right? All this stuff could be alleviated. All the problems we're having in terms of the decimation of our middle class through the misappropriation and malformation of capital to the reindustrialization of our country that will create the jobs to make people happy. People are not happy anymore. The cost of living is through the roof. The affordability crisis is real. And the real problem is if America could work very closely with Russia and China, it would be absolutely prosperous and everything will be fixed. But unfortunately, we have a fifth column, a parasitic fifth column, deeply wedged in Washington, D.C., that's in both sides of the aisle that prevents that from occurring. And it's like we have this covenant with losers, and I'm talking about the EU and everybody else, the countries that we don't need, that we have no reason to, and we follow this stupid ideology that's like stuck in 1991. It benefits no one except the parasitic vulture class that's been bleeding us dry and eating our flesh. That's the hope here. If we can shake off these assholes that run this country and be able to integrate with Russia, with China, we will be. You'll have a century of peace. That's the potential and prosperity. But I don't know if the American public is angry enough or educated enough to see this. Very few people are.
Well, I guess here's like not like a criticism at that point, but like I guess a question with like the recent tariffs and the stuff going on with Greenland. Like, aren't you starting to see like a bit of separation between like the European agenda and what the U.S. agenda is, and
on the surface, yeah.
The U.S. is not a monolith, but it seems like there is starting to be some separation between what would be good for Europe and what would be good for the U.S.
Yeah. Well, I think there's always been a fundamental separation between what is good for.
But is it really a separation, or is it, or is it the other aspect of it? Is it really separation, or is it a cudgel for control to bring the rest of the Western world along with us, so the vulture class can continue to pillage? That's the other thing.
To loot the treasury.
Exactly. And to loot every country's treasury, because all the Western nations, they're all in a managed decline. And we're teetering on the brink with one foot on the edge and the other foot on a banana peel. So we haven't fallen into that managed decline yet. We've been fighting it tooth and nail because, thank God, the framers of the Constitution were wise enough to decentralize the states as much as possible. But, so the question becomes, because those other countries, Europe and Canada and the UK, they're all donezo, Australia as well. Is this a move to cudgel, to bring them into a position where the vulture class that's in DC can continue to just extract them and use them as resource colonies, so to speak, right?
Yeah, the thing that'll be interesting is because it's really hard to see dramatic changes from the current political setup when you've got congressmen from Tel Aviv and senators from Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, right? But when you have enough people starting to wake up and see, hey, I think there are changes that need to happen. I think this is existential at this point, and you're basically fighting against modern Bolsheviks, which it's not the same exact group. They have their henchmen, like you see in Minneapolis and some of the stuff with what's going on there. But, same tactics, the same political violence, the same, all these different things, it's happened before. And so to assume that they're going to basically calm down and just take whatever happens next lying down, I think is not going to happen. And I think they're basically, it seems like they're ramping up as far as, okay, we've got operations that we're going to run in Minneapolis, and we've got things that we're going to do if Trump does this, and it's kind of the chess match, it seems like, is playing out. So,
well, this is where we start to tread on the very weak bridge of, oh yeah, Trump's going to save us. We got these people. I don't know if you've seen the videos, but I don't have any handy to share here today. But they've got guys going around following people, yelling at them, these leftists yelling at regular people saying, F ICE, say to F ICE. And I'm toning the language down here. And they're harassing them. And then they had these guys break into a church with Don Lemon, and they start going after all the people in the church, yelling at them and screaming all this BLM stuff. And people are hugging their kids are scared. And, it appears that Don Lemon's going to get charged. Ironically, Don Lemon, a black man, is going to get charged with the Klan Act on MLK Day, which is really all very funny. But in the end, that's the kind of stuff that's going on. And sure, okay, that one thing, by the way, the pastor of that church isn't an ICE person, an ICE employee of some kind. That's probably why they targeted him. But the point is that they got people being beat, harassed, everything. And you send a few hundred ICE guys and, National Guard guys over. I don't really see a whole lot going down. We were promised mass deportations. We were promised millions being kicked out. And Donald Trump hasn't moved. Obama has deported more people in the same time frame than Trump has. So, what your comment was, Ben, was that when you have enough people getting upset about what's going on, what the fuck else do we need to see? What the fuck else is left? Do we need people being murdered on the streets? Oh no, we saw that. We already saw that in 2020. Ain't nothing changed, right? We got the same problems as we did before, right? And now you got nothing happening. We're going to see a blue wave in the midterms because nothing has been fixed. And I know EM's going to yell at me for this later. And, Tom Luongo probably too. It's no, well, it's got to happen in a certain order in a certain time. Guess what? We don't have time. There is no time. you're going to do it or not.
I think there's a false notion that there are higher benevolent powers that are in control and are managing this to some greater, 4D chess type of ending. And that is just not the case. When you look at guys, like, I just can't go along with this narrative, man. It's like, if people show you who the hell they are, believe them. That's number one. And number two, it's like, overtly, yeah, you're going to see winnings, but I'll give you an example. Have you guys ever seen Stranger Things on Netflix?
Except the most recent season. We're waiting until it's all out.
Okay, so all of it is out. The most recent season has been rated as the most terrible. They were given 3 years to write a phenomenal season finale and a season series finale, so to speak, and they dropped the bag.
That's terrible. It's such a good show.
I have to admit, I gave up after season 2 or 3.
Dude, season 4 was absolutely on fire.
I thought it was great.
It was phenomenal, right? Season 5 was a joke. Now, but because the way season 5 ended, many of the fans of the Stranger Things started to come up with these theories. One of it was something called Capture Gate or something like that, or Conception Gate, where they thought, okay, this was all some sort of a mind game that the Duffer Brothers, the producers of the show, were playing with the audience. And in fact, there's a secret episode that they're going to air on such and such a date. And then all the autists, all the.
Are we trusting the plan with Stranger Things?
No. Listen, I'm gonna tie that in. Check this out. I'm gonna tie that in. Then all the internet sleuths, they went online. They looked through the episode frame by frame. They picked out, so and so was wearing a watch. It said this time, and look at the date on that calendar on that far wall. And on January the 9th, the real final episode is going to fall. It's going to drop, and all of us are going to be blown away. It's going to be amazing. And they were coming up with all these stories. And then, of course, I'm not even touching the tip of the iceberg here of all the scenarios they discussed. But the fact is, they were coping for a poorly written season. They were coping for a bad storyline. And I think that's what's happening here in the United States. There are private interests that do not give a flying rat's ass about you and I and the Joe public on the street. They don't care. Why? Because they've been plotting and pilfering for the last 50 years. These are creatures of habit. That's what they'll continue to do. Like I gave an analogy years ago. If the oceans of the world were to dry up, we would still build submarines and then have a bucket brigade to they'll form and pour buckets of water on it. Why? Because that's just what we do. That's the mentality of these people, right? So I don't see some long, far-flung plan that's going to benefit the individual. Why? Because everything that these quote-unquote elites and these people in power, what they're trained and what they're conditioned and what they're habitual to is the utilization of capital in a very poorly misguided way that only benefits them. And I don't see that changing. That's the problem here. We're seeing all the stupid shit that the United States is doing and thinking that there's some master plan behind it. Guys, it's just a poorly written script. That's all it is.
Stranger Things. The U.S. is Stranger Things. That's what we're like basically saying here. I mean, I thought they were going to make that one. I thought they were going to make Wes gay. It's because they were like hinting at that.
Will
what's that his name? The little
one of them. Dude, like that coming out of the closet routine. I saw that on social media. I was like, of course.
Terrible. Of course, exactly.
Well, they were hitting at it. And it's like, hey, can we just leave that out for once? But no, we can't. And so did the sleuths, the online sleuths, say that JFK Jr. was going to come out of the upside down to save
that was the only thing missing. But the elements, you can see the elements, the style, the desire, because you guys have to remember, culturally speaking, more than any other country in the world, right? Culturally speaking, we're a culture that's been completely raised by pop culture, by superheroes, by Marvel, that has framed a lot of our worldview. So we're thinking that there's, we have alien technology, Area 51, Roswell, New Mexico, secret government, breakaway civilization, blah, 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 blah. And breakaway civilization, it's like, how, where, when, and it's like, because we're thinking that there's some sort of overarching plan of these people that are going to move our country forward because we're part of some sort of greater civilization and whatnot. And the thing is, it's really not. These people are in it for themselves. And that's what, we got, even Trump, man, come on. The guy is, I mean, can he just come out and say that he just been, that he's a complete Shabbos goy at this point?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at it from the point of view of, all right, fine, it's all fucked. What do you do? And I think precious metals is a great place to hide out. I'm thinking, unless there is unless there is this miraculous clean out of the elites and the swamp gets drained, and I'm not counting on that, but it could happen. It's fine. We can all dream about whatever. But if none of that happens, then what? Right? Because I don't think it's going to be much better for Americans anywhere else, unless you can set up in, like, I don't know. There's a lot of things to think about with that. Maybe El Salvador or something if you have the money. But for most people, they're not going to get out. They'll stay here. They'll stay in LA, and everything will be burning, and they'll say this is fine. And like they did in 2020. I left LA for that reason. So the question is how do you handle it? Like, what do you do to at least continue the fight on your own porch? You know what I mean? Unless we can continue the fight in your neighborhood or something. That's the question. Like, how do you strategize for the worst case scenario? Because with an armed country, they're not going to be able to take over the whole thing. They'll break it up, and you'll have, California be its own hellhole, and New York be its own hellhole, and New Jersey be its own hellhole, and then you'll have the interior of the U.S. It'll be a different kind of hellhole, but at least, like, the people who live there will be a lot more influential than they are right now. And I don't know. I'm like, how do you strategize for that? That's the question.
Well, that's a tough one, but I think you are already kind of seeing just the regional focus that's happened since 2020, where people, like you said, are moving to places where they feel like, hey, this is a much better fit for a variety of reasons, right? And so kind of focusing in on at a more local level, like, hey, like, this is not a good place to be, or this is somewhere I want to stay, somewhere where I can actually see writing it out. Because I think there's a lot of people where, like, look, the U.S. is home for me. Like, I'm not going to go run off to Southeast Asia or South America. I mean, it would have to get really, really bad, like complete shit show, for me to even consider going to South America. But I think there's a lot of advantages the U.S. has, and I think there are certain things that it'll be hard to know how exactly all this stuff plays out. But I think there are enough people here still that have a memory, or have, like, the kind of appreciation for what America used to be, what it could be, and kind of look at it as, hey, this is our land, and we're not going to be apologizing anymore for saying, you know what, like, the door is closed, we're not letting any more people in, and, like, doing some of the things that need to be done. So I don't know where it goes in the meantime. I think it's going to be bumpy for the next 5 years, but 10, 20 years out, like, I think the U.S. is probably still in one piece as a country. So that's it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if it's tech native America style, where we have Canada and Mexico and all this other stuff, and it's basically uniting North America. But I think there are certain things about the U.S. that are not going to change, and there are a lot of problems for sure, and we kind of hit on most of the big ones today. But I think there is a path through for a lot of this stuff, right? Is it clean? No. Is it going to be quick? Probably not. But I think there's certain things that will be right. If you're not optimistic on this stuff, then, like, what's the point, right? That's kind of the thing that I go back to, where it's like, if it's all like the black pill approach, then, like, why are we even having the show? Why, like, do people keep working hard? Why do people keep trying to build, right?
Yeah.
So that's like the biggest thing that you have to go back to on individual levels. Like, look, if you let the optimism go, or you don't have something that a goal that you're working toward, or something that you're trying to build or achieve or do, right? If you don't have any hope, then right? What's the point?
Yeah. Well, I think that, and you can ask V. I'm always the one that's trying to limit the black pill on these shows. I'm not a black piller. What I'm more about is what is the most realistic probability and how do we optimize for that? And I think a lot of the problem is that people think that Trump's going to save them, and optimizing for that is a bad move. Now, I could be proven wrong. I would be happy to be proven wrong. So the real question is okay, what's the plan then? Like, what are you going to work towards? Because just because your favorite president didn't do his job and maybe some bad guys took over for a while, does that mean you're just going to throw up your hands and, bend over for Davos? Like, that's not a very good plan. I don't think any of us in this audience are planning to do that. The question is, what are you going to do? So I would say if I were somebody who didn't have, and these would be my closing thoughts. Ben, I'd love to hear your guys' opinion or even separate thoughts from this. But if I didn't have any money, I would go learn being an electrician or construction, because all the next big projects I think are going to have to do with the expansion of power grid. Even if the shit doesn't go so well here, I think that'll still continue.
I'll add one more thing: mining and or stuff to do with physical commodities. You can throw that in the basket as well.
So
sorry to interrupt, but
it's all good. So those things, whether it's, learn those skills, go get those trades, make that money, and then find a way to turn that money into something that's going to grow, which of course, most of us in the audience are about precious metals. There might be a few cryptos out there that could save the day. I prefer something for long-term precious metals. I like crypto when crypto is doing well. That's when I like crypto. But I think crypto has probably seen most of its move up for another few years. But yeah, I would get the work, get the experience, have a job where you're actually doing something that is in demand, like those things I mentioned, and then learn how to turn that into more money, whether it's Algo Factory, learning how to trade, or investing in what you think is good. That's how I would plan for it. And it just means get to work. And it means stop paying attention to the bullshit. And it means stop looking at, the video where the watch said 9/14, and that means on September 14th, the JFK Jr. is going to pull a rabbit out of his hat and it's going to run the country. I think we need to start growing up and being a little bit more realistic about what the best thing is. And that's where I'm going to leave it.
Yeah, you got to put the weaponized autism to good use instead of wasting it.
Yeah, exactly. I think ultimately the answer lies within us as a nation, as a country. And I think, there are some good hallmarks here. More and more people that are, a lot of the young people that are leaning more conservative, more. It's like a new brand of avant-garde conservatism. So there is some hope there.
I think it's right-wing, basically.
Yeah,
that's what I call it, because conservatives haven't conserved jack shit over the last 50 years.
No, exactly correct. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ben, closing thoughts.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting times to be paying attention to all this stuff. For people trying to keep up with what's going on, I think definitely makes sense to watch Trump's speech at the World Economic Forum tomorrow. Keep an eye out for that. I'll be curious to see what he says and kind of what kind of comes in the following weeks as far as events, Greenland, 10% tariffs, or if that's just a threat to basically move things along. I think with the pace they moved on to Greenland, I think I was pretty surprised about how quickly they moved from, okay, we're doing the thing in Venezuela, and then bam, we're on to Greenland within a couple weeks, right? There's no hesitation there. So if they do get their act together and they are going to be increasing the pace, that might give them a shot in the midterms. If you're optimistic about it, we'll see what happens, but they're going to need to do some things here on the home front to get people to turn out and vote, right? And whether that's working on the voter ID stuff and working on the voter fraud or working on the deportations, all these different things, right? But I think it's definitely going to be interesting to watch. I go back and forth between being optimistic and, like you said, hoping Trump is going to fix it is not the greatest strategy, but it's definitely one of those things where it's hard to look away. So as far as markets, right, silver might be 100 by the end of this week. It might be 100 by the end of this quarter, but I think it's triple digits and then some by the end of this year, right? So, and if you're looking at it from 6 to 12 months out, right? Anyone can scrape together $100 to start buying a silver ounce here or there, right? And so it doesn't have to be some massive purchase where gold's 4,500. That's a big chunk. Platinum is a big chunk, but right, if you're just going to dollar cost average into something physical, something that can't be printed, right? I think that's a good way to start. So it's not right at the end of the day, everyone starts somewhere, and you have to start to make those steps. So I think that's as far as I'll leave it for markets and all that stuff, but definitely.
Sorry to interrupt. Remember, we don't give investment advice. We're just talking about what we do as opposed to what we're telling people to do. Just a quick note there.
Yeah, I guess the advice I'll give is everyone should consider, I think, having precious metals in their possession with the amount of chaos and the amount of other things going on, right? So if you're going to buy it and try and trade it in a week, right? I'm not your guy, but if you can hang on to it for longer than 6 months, 12 months, right? I think that's going to be a pretty good place to be. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. But again, it's different risk reward for any different things you're going to set up. So that's kind of what I got.
Awesome. V, can you get us out of here, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank all you guys for listening in. Check out Ben's work. The links are all in the description box. Keep it locked and loaded right here. ESW Rogue News. With that being said, Cowboy, take it away.